I lived in Fresno, California for 20 years, and something happened to me back in 2015. One night, I was driving from work, and as I was about to enter the dark highway, I saw a woman wearing red standing on the side of the road. I was wondering who would be out this late, but I just shrugged it off, thinking it was probably homeless, so I ignored it. Every night, on my way home from work, I would see the same woman standing on the side of the road, but I would always ignore her. This time I slowly approached her. She's a young, beautiful Asian woman who always carries a large bag. I finally opened the window and asked her if she needed anything. She slowly turned her head and said that if I could please take her home. I told her that I was pretty tired and needed to head straight home. So she just slowly put her head down and went back to her same position. I was thinking to myself that she kind of had a creepy attitude. The next day, coming home from work, I saw her again, and she was in the same position and same spot that she was every night. When I approached her again and asked if she still wanted a ride home, she simply shook her head and walked slowly to my car. I unlocked my door and she went straight to open my passenger door and sat down. I took a closer look at her, and she's a stunning Asian girl. She speaks fluent Hmong and has a very sweet voice. Driving on the dark freeway with her kinda gives me the chills, but I decided to ask her questions. She explained that she was lost and couldn't find her way home when I asked why she was always standing on the same road. While driving, I realized that it's so cold inside the car that even though I blast the heater all the way, the car doesn't seem to warm up. I pulled out my phone from my pocket while driving and dropped it at her feet and apologized. I turned on the interior light, and when I looked at her shoes, she was wearing those dead people's shoes. Those are the shoes that when someone dies, they give that person to wear. I got scared and told her that I'd get my phone later and turned the light off. She then slowly grabbed her bag and slowly opened it. I looked at it and it was some Hmong traditional clothes. She asked if I wanted to keep the clothes, and I said no, because I didn't need them. She then said that she could not take it with her because it was too heavy, but I considered rejecting her offer. Finally, we arrived at her destination. It was a dark alley with no light. So she told me to stop there and she would walk home. She opened the door and just stood in the same position, looking down. As I drove away and looked at my rear view mirror, I could see her looking at me. I drove so fast home, and as I was halfway to my house, I realized that she had forgotten her big bag that she always carried. Her bag was half open, and I could see that it was full of joss paper, the paper used for the dead. I got freaked out and threw her bag out onto the street. When I got home, took a shower, and went to sleep, I dreamt that she was very mad at me for throwing her bag away because that was her only money. I went to visit my mom and told her everything. She told me that she had a friend that lived near that alley where I dropped off the Hmong girl. My mom said that her friend has a daughter, and one night her daughter went jogging in the alley and someone murdered her and hid her body behind a dumpster. But what still creeps me out is that when my mom went on Facebook and showed me a family photo, and there she was, the same girl I dropped off. She was wearing the same red shirt. My mom then pointed it to the picture and said, "That's the one that got murdered." I was shaking at this point. I started to get sick and couldn't get up to work. Some nights, I dream about her being angry at me for throwing her bag away and how poor she is now. My mom hired a shaman to do a ritual for me, but I was still sick and even dreamt that she came and told me I could never get away with throwing her bag of money away. My mom took me to the hospital so many times, and the doctor said that they could not detect anything wrong with me. I was losing so much weight, and my mom decided to call my uncle over and pray for me because they are Christians. My uncle and his church people came and said their prayers for me. I began to feel better the next day, and ever since then, I have been doing well and have not dreamt of that girl anymore. In 2007, I was coming from San Francisco one night after crabbing. It was 2 a.m. and I was driving on the long, dark highway with no cars around me. It took me about 3 hours to drive from San Francisco to Fresno, and this is something I encountered that I'll never forget. I have some friends who live in the Bay Area, and we finally planned to go crabbing, so I went up to crab with them. I arrived in San Francisco early in the morning and began fishing and crabbing. All my buddies started showing up around noon. We have so much fun and talk about our childhood memories. They bought beer and invited me to join them, but I declined because I had a long drive home ahead of me. We crabbed the whole day and had a blast. Finally, it got to 1 a.m. and everyone started to pack up. Most of my buddies were wasted by this time, and only one of them was sober because he was the driver. We shook hands and said our goodbyes, and I started my 3-hour journey home back to Fresno. I was so tired because of getting to the spot early and didn't eat much. During the drive home, I would splash water from the water bottle on my face to keep me awake. When I got to Modesto, all of my energy was gone, but I kept driving until I got to Turlock, where I looked for a rest stop but couldn't find one. I finally came across a rest stop, but somehow it looked very old. The sign for the rest stop is pretty rusted, but I just shrugged it off. As I approached the rest stop, I noticed it was on a dirt road and assumed it was an older rest stop. I parked my car and got out. I walked to the restroom, passing a couple of vending machines, but they were all dead and not working. I got to the restroom and there was a small light flickering. I thought to myself, it's better than no light. As I was peeing, I could see a foot sticking out from one of the stalls. It had no shoes on, and I was thinking to myself that when I got here, there was no car parking around me. I thought it was just homeless people and shrugged it off. I walked and turned on the water to wash my hands, but there was no running water, so I just got out. As I was walking to my car, I felt a cold wind blow into my ear, and when I looked to my left, I saw this woman wearing white with long hair sitting on the bench. I ignored the woman and continued walking until she said, "Hey brother, can you please bring my shoes to me?" I slowly stopped and said, "Where are your shoes?" She pointed it to a table close to me. I turned and looked, and saw that on top of the table were her shoes. I turned and grabbed her shoes, but when I looked at her shoes, they looked weird. They had long, pointed toes. I got up to her and placed her shoes on the ground and said, "Here you go." I couldn't see her face much because she was always looking in the opposite direction. So I walked away, and she said, "Can you please fix the shoes for me? I have a condition and cannot bend down." I told her that I could not help her because I was in a rush to go home. She begged me over and over again, so being the nice guy I am, I decided to walk over to her and bend down. I grabbed her shoes and started to fix them. Her feet were smelling very bad, and I could see something moving inside her shoes. I flipped the shoes upside down and, to my horror, tons of maggots were coming out of her shoes. I dropped the shoes away and got up to see her staring at me. Her face was rotten and maggots were coming out of her eyes. I ran so fast to my car, started my car, and sped off. The dirt road became a longer road than when I first came, and it felt like forever to get out of the rest stop. I was shaking and finally reached back to the highway. When I finally got back home, I did tons of research about the rest stops near Turlock and found that there are no rest stops that I could find that are on dirt roads or near the location where I turned. Does anyone ever have a similar experience like mine? Because I felt like I was going crazy every time I thought about it. Some people said that I might have gone into the netherworld and come back into this world. I'm a person who never believed in ghosts or superstitions, but after my experience, I truly believe that there's a lot to believe in.